Have you ever had one of those days, or maybe even weeks, where you feel like you're just going through the motions? Reacting to emails, to traffic, to whatever life throws at you, instead of feeling like you're actually in the driver's seat? Well, today, we're going to talk about that. We're going to explore that journey from living on autopilot to becoming the architect of your own life, both in your personal world and in how you show up as a leader. This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It perfectly captures this huge blind spot we all have. We think we're making conscious choices, that we're acting with purpose, but so often we're just reacting based on old habits and programming. And that confusion right there is the very definition of living on autopilot. Learning how to spot the difference and break that cycle. That's what this is all about. All right, so let's dive into our first section. What does it really mean to be living on autopilot? It's that nagging feeling, right? That sense that you're stuck in these invisible patterns, running on a kind of software that was installed a long, long time ago. And here's a kind of radical idea. We hear all the time, be your authentic self. But what if that authentic you is actually just a collection of your past programming? Think about it. It's a bunch of old choices you made maybe years ago under totally different circumstances. The person and the habits that got you here might not be the ones that'll get you where you really want to go. This sets up this amazing tension inside all of us. On one hand, you've got your predictable self. This part of you loves comfort, it loves routine, it loves clear roles, and it's always looking for the easy, energy-saving path. It's kind of like your anchor, keeping you steady. But then, there's your unpredictable self. That's the restless part, the one that craves growth and adventure, the part that wants to rip up the script. That's your sail. And a meaningful life isn't about choosing the anchor or the sail. It's about learning when to hold steady, and, more importantly, when to catch the wind. So the big question is, how do we actually break this cycle of just reacting all the time? Well, it all starts in that tiny, tiny space between something happening, a trigger, and how we respond to it. It all begins with a simple, intentional pause. Look, you and we can't control what's going to happen next week. We probably can't even control the rest of today. But the next minute, that is ours. We can own that. This is such a powerful way to reframe things. One single minute lived with total intention can have more impact than a whole hour spent on autopilot. You don't have to fix your whole life right now. You just have to own your next minute. And here's a super practical way to use that minute. It's called the pause practice. So when you feel that trigger, that emotional reaction bubbling up, first, just pause. Seriously, take one deep breath. Then, acknowledge what you're feeling without judging it. Next, try to understand what the trigger is really about. From there, you can select an action that lines up with who you want to be, not just how you feel in the moment. And finally, execute. Take that small, intentional step. That's it. That's how you go from being a puppet of your reactions to making a real choice. Okay, so you've hit pause, now what? What do you actually do in that moment? It really helps to have a few mental models, a couple of tools in your back pocket to help you make sense of the chaos that might be happening inside. Think of this next section as your inner toolkit. First up is something called the NAS method. When a really strong emotion hits, like a wave of anger or anxiety, our first instinct is usually to either fight it off or just get completely swept away by it. NAS gives us a third option. It's a simple, really human way to meet that emotion head-on without letting it run the show. It's just 3 easy steps. First, you name the emotion. Just saying to yourself, oh, this is frustration, or okay, that's hurt. It creates a little bit of space. Second, you appreciate it. Now that sounds weird, right? You're not appreciating it because it feels good. You're appreciating it as a signal, a flashing light telling you that something you care about is on the line. And third, you stay with it. Don't rush to fix it or act on it. Just sit with the feeling for a second. This is what lets you respond from a place of choice, not just pure reflex. Another incredibly useful tool is what's called the mind's counsel. Now, this isn't some complex psychological theory. It's just a really practical way to recognize that there are different voices inside your head, all fighting for the microphone, especially when you're stressed out or under pressure. Think of it like this. Your inner counsel has 4 key members. You've got the ego, who's the doer, always trying to protect your image and get things done. Then there's the thinker, your inner planner, trying to analyze everything and make sense of it all. You also have the witness, who's just the quiet observer in the back of the room, noticing everything without judgment. And finally, there's presence, that deep, silent stillness underneath all the mental chatter. Once you start recognizing which voice is talking, you can stop fighting with yourself and start making choices that feel truly aligned. Okay, so we've got this inner toolkit now. So what? Let's talk about how this all translates to the outside world, especially in the way we lead people and tackle modern challenges. In our fourth section here, we're going to see how this deep self-awareness can actually become a leadership superpower. So to really get why today's leadership challenges are so different, we need a tiny bit of history. Real quick, the first couple of industrial revolutions basically treated workers like parts of a machine. You were valued for your efficiency. Then, the third one, the information age, started to see people as assets. Human beings with unique talents. But now, in this fourth revolution, with AI and data driving everything, there's a real danger of sliding backward, where efficiency could once again start to overshadow our humanity. And this is exactly why the old ways of leading are breaking down. We're living in a world that is just defined by constant change and unpredictability. So trying to lead with an old, outdated map that was made for a stable, predictable world, it's not just ineffective, it's absurd. We need a whole new approach, one that's built for ambiguity. And for any leader today, this next distinction is absolutely crucial. You have to know if you're facing a complicated problem or a complex one. A complicated problem, like building a skyscraper, is predictable. It's hard for sure, but there's a blueprint. An expert can solve it. But a complex problem, like leading a team through a massive change or even raising a child, is unpredictable. There's no instruction manual. It requires constant adaptation, resilience, and patience, not just expertise. So as we're trying to lead through all this complexity, every single interaction starts to matter a whole lot more. Which brings us to a pretty provocative question I want you to ask yourself. How does your presence affect other people? When you walk into a room, do you lift the energy? Do you make people feel more creative and purposeful? Or do you leave them feeling drained, heavy, and a little bit smaller? Our choices, our presence, our intention, it all adds up to whether we're an energy source or an energy vampire. And that brings us to our final section, where we're going to tie all of these threads together. This is where we reframe this whole thing, not as life being something that just happens to us, but as something that we can consciously and intentionally design. Now, here's a really profound shift in thinking. We're usually obsessed with growth as creation, right? Building new habits, starting new projects, adding more to our lives. But so often, real growth requires demolition. It takes a ton of courage to look at our lives and consciously dismantle the habits, the beliefs, and the systems that just don't serve us anymore. It's about making space for what's next. It's renewal, not just addition. And this leads to a pretty big realization. Growth itself isn't optional. It's the default setting for life. We are always growing, always changing. The only choice we actually have is in what direction. Are we growing more bitter or more grateful? Are we becoming more shallow or growing deeper? More distracted or more focused? Every day, every moment, we're making a choice. Some of these directions demand our full, conscious effort. And others, well, they only require our neglect. So, you see, the question is never if you are growing. You are. We all are. The real question, the one I want to leave you with, is this. Into what and by whose design? Is the person you're becoming the result of a conscious choice, an intentional architecture? Or is it just the product of unconscious reactions and that old, outdated programming? The answer to that question, well, that changes everything.